to our next session. As I told you, we're studying Regina versus Dudley and Stevens. And in Regina versus Dudley and Stevens, if you read the case, and please do, it will be on your first quiz, you'll see that these men are lost at sea. They decide in order to survive, someone has to die. They take a life, they eat that person. And I asked you to find out and study and tell me whether or not you think they're guilty of murder, or do you think they did what they had to do. Now, I told you that there are three main theories of law. And under one such theory, the men are innocent. Under another such theory, the men are guilty. Let's take our first theory of law. It's based by Aristotle. And Aristotle lived between the time of 384 to 322 BC. If you could turn back the calendar to the years between 384 and 322 BC, you might have the opportunity to meet Aristotle. Locating him would probably not be too difficult because he spent much of his time at a school near Athens called the Lyceum, which he founded. The Lyceum was a beautiful place with elaborate gardens and imposing statues of the Greek gods. In these gardens, Aristotle taught students about his concept of law. Now, please note this. Aristotle built upon the Greek notion that the world was ordered by a cosmic law, or to use his term, natural law. He simply meant that there is a law higher than that which is made by mortals, a kind of ideal law. Aristotle, please note this, tried to connect moral principles and legal principles. So Aristotle believed in this concept of natural law. He believed that there was a force higher than man, and that this is the force that we should be following. Notice that he didn't call him God, because the Greeks believed in different gods. Now, what made Aristotle come to this conclusion? Well, natural phenomena. Aristotle, by observation, noticed the phenomena of the world. For example, the seasons change. We have fall, spring, summer, winter. He also noticed that the moon exists, the sun exists. But more importantly, what he noticed about this is that these things just don't exist. They exist with a purpose. Without the sun, we couldn't live. If the seasons didn't change, we couldn't plant food. Now, we, men and women, don't control this phenomenon. So the question Aristotle asked, who gave it its purpose? Not man or woman, because man or woman can't control it. How many times have you woke up wishing it was night and it's day? You can't change it. How many times you wish it was summer and it's winter? You can't change it. But someone gave it its purpose. So Aristotle believed that there's a higher being other than man, and his concept of natural law. Now we come down to a different perspective, but a different way of looking at it. This is St. Thomas Aquinas, who lived between 1225 and 1274. In order to become a Dominican friar, Thomas Aquinas attended the University of Paris and obtained a doctorate in theology. Soon afterwards, he became a leader in the Roman Catholic Church, an advisor to Pope Urban IV, and a prolific writer. We can learn about his theory of law by reading his Summa Theologica, in which he suggests, please note this, that law is given to us by God and then interpreted by man's natural reasons. Man's law may err, but God's law cannot. What he did is follow up on Aristotle's notion of a higher power, but he gave a name to this power. He called it God. He says that God has already given us the law, and that man doesn't need any law. But let's look at God's law. Many of us say that law don't work. Aquinas says it's not God that's at fault, it's us. Well, look at God's law. Under God's law, it says, thou shalt not kill. So if you followed God's law and somebody tried to kill you, then you would have to just die. Well, how many of us would do that? So many of us say, well, if someone is trying to kill me, I have a right to kill them. And any law that says I don't, that law is wrong. But Aquinas says that law isn't wrong. He says, wouldn't you want to live in a world where you didn't have to worry about being killed? Wouldn't you want to live in a world where you wouldn't have to worry about people stealing from you? So it's not God's law that's wrong. It's our interpretation of God's law. Because of that, so as part of their philosophies of law, Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas shared a belief in what is called a transcendent law given to man. The word transcendent means handed down. For example, the symbolism of a transcendent law is Moses. If you know about Moses, he went to the mountaintop. When he got to the mountaintop, what happened? He was given the law by God. What did he do? He brought the law down to the people. Therefore, transcended, handed down. Both men saw a relationship between moral justice and law. Others also have worked with the concept of natural law. To pursue this perspective on the law, you might examine the works of Immanuel Kant and John Locke. If you study John Locke, you know that John Locke is the philosopher behind the concept of democracy. Our next one takes a different approach. His name is Friedrich Karl von Savigny. Savigny was an orphan of German origin and received his education by moving from university to university while still in his 20s. He took a teaching position at Marburg. Marburg, so you'll know, is one of the oldest universities in the world, and it exists even to this day. And there he produced a highly renowned legal treatise. A treatise is writings on one subject, including all the writings known in the world, and they're all put together in one subject. Savigny continued his writing at a number of educational institutions in Russia, Berlin, and Paris. Now, this is what you want to know. Savigny was instrumental in developing, please note, the historical school of jurisprudence. This school of thought suggests that law evolves as a result of the historical direction of the nation. Even legislators, Savigny would suggest, merely put into words that which is embedded in the larger web of a given nation's history. The name that Savigny gave this expression of the spirit of the people is Volksgeist. Critics of the historical school of jurisprudence in general, and of Savigny in particular, ask whether law simply reflects the common consciousness of the nation, as he suggests, or helps to mold the future. Now, Savigny is interesting. Savigny rejects the notion that there's a higher being or a God. He suggests that our law comes about through trial and error. As we live, we learn, we change, and we make laws to reflect that change. He argues no supreme being came down and told us what to do, that the facts on the ground told us what to do. So, for example, if you lived in New York in 1862, you got around the city by horse and carriage. If you live in New York today, you get around by subway. Now, what caused us to move from horse and carriage to subway? Savigny would argue the natural progression of life. As we live, we learn, we change. He argues no supreme being told us to change. We change because of facts on the ground. So the real issue is, which one of these is right? Is it Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, or Savigny? But if you look at this, what this really reflects is what I told you, the two main sources of law: morality and empirical knowledge. We find that Aristotle and St. Thomas Aquinas fall on the side of morality, that our laws should be based on morality. We see that Savigny falls on the side of empirical knowledge, knowledge gained from experience. What we do know is that our laws are better when we include both. That there has to be some morality in our law, some basic sense of right and wrong, and there has to be this notion of change. As we learn, we develop, we create, we become different. So neither one of them is wrong. What it is that law is about both of them. So if you look at our laws, it has both morality in it and empirical knowledge. If you think about it, we don't do a lot of things that our parents used to do, and our children will do a lot of things that we will not do a lot of things that we used to do. In other words, in law, it must reflect who we are. There are two sides of us, and there are two sides of law: morality, empirical knowledge. This morality sometimes can be difficult because what you think may be right, I may think is wrong. Empirical knowledge can be difficult, as I pointed out before. Two people can have the same experience and come away with different conclusions. Apply this to our case. If you look at it strictly from a moral point of view, then these men would be guilty. If you look at it from an empirical point of view, you might have a different conclusion. Your conclusion might be that they did what they had to do. Please discuss this, read the case, read the theories.